Welcome to the Capital News. I'm your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Thursday, October 15th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. The title of today's podcast is Townhalls and Jobs. Of course, we had two separate town halls this evening, one with President Trump, the other with former Vice President Joe Biden. So we're going to get to that. A lot of market performance data to get to. Choppy session on Wall Street. A bad day across the pond in Europe. Is this going to be a continuation? Are there further concerns with COVID-19 resurgence? Pretty much everywhere, but specifically some big spikes in Europe and across several states here in the United States as well. So is this coming full circle? Is this going to turn into a second wave? Are there going to be further full lockdowns, restrictions, tight restrictions? What's going to take place? This is uncertainty. The markets do not like uncertainty. There's, of course, a lot of money being thrown at the problem. The ECB has the pedal on the metal. The Bank of England is contemplating negative interest rates. Wink, wink. It means they're going to implement them. It's just a matter of time. They're sort of trying to get the blessing, the approval from the banking sector to do it. That's just to cover their rear ends. They're going to do it. And of course, here there's still bickering and back and forth with whether or not Congress is going to pass another round of spending. And of course, it's money that we do not have. So there's a lot of unknowns at this juncture. And as we spoke earlier this week, what is the market pricing in? And if a lot of those things don't come to fruition, well, then it would be reasonable to conclude that the market is going to sell off. To what degree is anybody's guess, but that would be the logical direction of the market movement. So a lot still has to unfold. Obviously, we're going to get to initial jobless claims, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, M2 money stock, and a couple, a real brief story, and just going to mention it in passing later in the podcast about the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, urging, of course, for more spending, and of course they call it stimulus. It's not, but that's what they call it. They call it stimulus. From the IMF, they want more spending. And then I want to cover a little bit about our national debt and deficits, just so you understand the math, because Joe Biden and President Trump are going to be throwing around a lot of numbers, as they have been. Joe Biden wants to claim that he's only going to raise taxes on people earning $400,000 or more. And of course, Donald Trump says he will continue with the regulatory cuts and with further tax cuts. As I have stated here many times before, your taxes are going up. This is basic mathematics. This is basic economics. There's just no ifs, and, or buts about it as far as I'm concerned. Deficits are too large. State debts are too large. They have to have balanced budgets. So at the state level, they're going to have to lay off people en masse, which is likely going to ensue. I think it's already underway. They're going to cut benefits to various programs, which is most likely already underway. And then they're going to raise taxes to make up for the shortfalls, where laying people off just isn't enough. So your taxes are going up. Now, if Trump should win re-election and the Republicans should regain both chambers of Congress, well then sure, you might get further tax cuts, perhaps at the federal level, but your deficits are going to continue to climb, so you're going to have to pay the inflation tax, which is the most destructive and devastating form of taxation that exists. But the Republicans, and surely the president, are never going to mention that to you. They're going to make you believe that tax cuts is like Tinkerbell sprinkling fairy dust on you, and you're going to be able to fly away to Never Never Land. That's not how this works, ladies and gentlemen. This is basic math. That's why I say, for God's sake, know a little math. One of the rules with the Cynic's Guide to Investing. Our book. Look it up. So I want to cover that because this is just basic arithmetic. And again, if Trump should win and pull that off, your taxes at the state level are going up. So just don't buy this baloney. That's where it is going to happen. So first to some market performance. A choppy session on Wall Street, but we have the dollar index slightly down, but it has been rallying the past couple of days, gaining some ground lost over the past couple of weeks. Trading at 93.825, 93.825. So again, with a strong 93 handle getting closer to a 94 handle. We will continue to monitor. This, of course, is most likely on the back of a continuation of some uncertainty across the pond, the ECB putting the pedal to the metal. So the currency war, the race to the bottom, continues. That's why the Federal Reserve is begging Congress to do more so it can justify its expansion of its balance sheet and the money supply, which, of course, we're going to get to here shortly. But a little bit of dollar weakness right now, and it's really not much strength in the euro or the pound or the Aussie or anything else. The dollar is holding its own despite the fact that the dollar index is down slightly. Choppy session on Wall Street today. In the red for most of the day, but then, of course, the administration and Thunder Thumbs has to get out there and say, oh, well, we're going to work on some more spending, some more stimulus, so don't worry, it's going to be big. Go big or go home type of thing. You know, it's going to be more than what the Democrats want, back and forth. Of course, we're going to have an agreement. It's all coming back to the American people. So, of course, we can beg, borrow, and spend money that we don't have. There's no cost to it. If that's the case, then if 2 trillion is good, then why isn't 4 trillion twice as good? Or 10 trillion 5 times as good? Right? These are basic questions to ask, and yet nobody ever seems to bring them up to the president, to Mnuchin, to Kudlow, to Pelosi, to McConnell, to Jay Powell. Not a one. Nobody is ever asked this question. Why 2 trillion? Why not 4? If 2 trillion's good, 4 trillion should be twice as good. People are suffering, aren't they? They're in food lines, aren't they? Can't find jobs, etc., etc., etc. But they don't want to have that conversation. They don't want to answer those questions. They don't know how to answer those questions. And it's a shame that these journalists, especially the financial media, doesn't want to ask the question. Because they know that this is the goose that continues to lay the golden egg, that continues to fuel this insane and asinine rally on the stock market, which continues to distort so many markets. It's not even funny, which is why this is just going to be an utter disaster, utter chaos when this thing unwinds. And it's already in the process of unwinding and unraveling. Just going to be completely devastating to so many people. But free money it is. And as I've stated, free was never so expensive. So overnight trading, we have the Dow Jones Industrial Average flat. Same for the S&P 500. The NASDAQ 100 is currently down about 0.9%. The cash trade in Japan is down 0.25%. Like I said, a sea of red across the pond in Europe. The UK exchanges were down over 1%. Germany suffering a big loss of over 2 percentage points. The French market's down slightly over 1%. The Italian market's down 2.4%. And the Spanish market's also down 1.4% for the day. Cash trade in Australia also currently down about 0.5%. Nothing drastic on the share front. Of course, we only cover a handful of shares here, but mainly in the tech sector. Nothing big. Tesla with the biggest drop on a percentage basis, losing about 2.5%, but Tesla's back and forth 2, 3, 4% on a daily basis, so nothing surprising there. On the commodity front, we have WTI trading at $40.57 a barrel, Brent at $42.72, natural gas $2.76, still close to that 20-month high that we noted earlier in the week. Gold and silver, choppy day on the session as well, regained some of their losses at the end of the day. Gold is hovering around $1,900 an ounce, currently trading at $1,905 an ounce. Silver also currently holding its own at $24.25. And then Uncle Sam's 10-year junk note to round it out is yielding 0.73%. So still a leg higher than where it has been, but nevertheless still apparently seemingly consolidating in perhaps another range. The market, the bond market, which again is still to me the bigger market, which it obviously is, but the more realistic market, still saying that there is no growth. And that sort of takes us to the town hall. And like we noted yesterday with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin saying, oh, it's okay if these spending talks are sort of on pause because Q3 is going to be a blowout quarter. The number's going to be fantastic. Well, Q3 already happened. And this phrase, as I stated yesterday, was going to be reiterated and pressed by the president, which it was. He brought this up during a rally this afternoon in North Carolina, and he brought it up this evening during his town hall in Florida, mentioning how strong he expects the third quarter figure to be. He said, watch for the third quarter. Well, Mr. President, with all due respect, the third quarter is already in the books. It's already happened. The government is now just adding everything up, putting it all together and saying, okay, here it is. We gained 25% quarter over quarter. That's it. Well, when you have the worst quarter in history in the second quarter, it stands to reason, if you have any type of economic activity in the subsequent quarter, being the third quarter, you're going to have a big number. And that's likely going to happen. This is basic math. Don't fall for it. This number is going to come out either the end of October or the 1st of November, depending on how the days fall. So it's going to come out a couple of days before the election. Most people are already going to have voted by then, and it's really not going to make a difference because the second quarter or the third quarter is already in the books. The question is what happens from here on out. That's why we're going to continue to look at initial jobless claims, because as far as the official jobs report is concerned, we've already seen the last of those prior to this election. That was the September jobs report, and that was not a pretty picture. And the numbers we're getting to today aren't too pretty either. But with the Trump-Biden town hall, Trump was in Florida, hosted by NBC with host or moderator, whatever you want to call her, Savannah Guthrie. She asked a lot of questions, pushed back, not surprised. Even before Trump was there, he was calling this a fake news event, that he was going to be harassed and this, that, or the other, sort of just setting the stage for how it was going to be. And it was somewhat combative, but that's his style. And I don't know how much substance there really was during his town hall. Of course, there was some. And, you know, he knows how to defend himself. He knows how to stick up for himself. He's his best spokesperson. And sometimes his worst, but that's how it is. I didn't learn too much from the president this evening. But I don't think he really did himself any damage, any harm. Same thing for Joe Biden, hosted by ABC over in Philadelphia with moderator host George Stephanopoulos. He didn't put his foot in his mouth either to throw him off track. However, with respect to Joe Biden, he still will not answer the question of packing the Supreme Court. Just won't answer it. And the answer that he comes up with is just ridiculous and nonsensical. Just say no. He's been on the record for years saying he is against packing the Supreme Court. I don't know what's so difficult. Is he really that concerned with progressive voters who want to pack the Supreme Court, that if he says no, that they're going to not vote for him? I don't think that's going to be the case. I mean, that's just illogical, because what you're saying then is they, the liberals, the progressives who might be concerned about it, well, then screw Joe. I'm just going to stay home. I'm not going to vote. Or Donald Trump, should he win re-election, he could potentially put a couple more justices on the Supreme Court. You have Justice Clarence Thomas, who is a conservative, who is up there in age, who could say, well, you know what? There's a Republican in the White House. He's going to be sworn in the year 2021. Maybe I'll retire in 2021 or 2022. Gives him ample time to find a replacement. You also have Justice Stephen Breyer, who is up there in age. He would be considered a liberal justice. But nonetheless, he could want to retire. He could get sick. He could, potentially pass away. I don't want that to happen, but that's a possibility. So do the progressives, do the liberals really want to hang that if Joe Biden says, hey, I want to pack the Supreme Court? Oh, well, screw Joe. Let's just let Trump maybe have another 2 Supreme Court nominations, which would make it a grand total of 5, should Trump get reelected, and that's how the scenario plays out. So you'd basically have a 7 conservatives on the Supreme Court against 2 liberals, being Justice Sotomayor and Justice Elena Kagan. That just doesn't make any sense. Furthermore, I think the Biden-Harris ticket, when they don't answer this question outright, could potentially alienate some Republicans who are not going to vote for Donald Trump. Well, they say, oh my goodness, well now this, I mean, if they're going to pack the court, I can't stand for that. I'm just not going to vote. Or I'm going to write somebody's name in. Or maybe they'll go back to Trump. To me, that's the bigger risk. You want every vote you can get. You want high turnout. You want people to cross the line. So I don't get it. Now, of course, at this juncture, we already have about 18, 19 million Americans who have already voted. By the time Election Day gets here, it's going to be quite a higher number, maybe half the country by then, maybe more. We'll have to see. That's quite an astonishing feat. So I really don't know how much this issue is really going to play out net. But still, just I understand that Biden-Harris think that they are sort of steady as she goes. They're up big in the polls, don't want to rock the boat, don't want to upset the progressives, don't think it's really going to sway Republicans or people who are going to cross the line and vote Democrat this time. Okay, I can kind of get that, but it just doesn't hurt you to say, no, we're not going to do it. Or I've heard this floated out there too. Say, hey, you know what? We're going to hang this over the head of Mitch McConnell. He wants to play politics. Well, we're going to play politics too. I don't necessarily think that's the best way to go, but at least it gives an answer. It's more of a concrete answer. We're going to use this as a negotiating chip. They want to play politics. We're going to play politics. This non-answer answer to me is just weak, and it doesn't do it. But net, I really don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. Donald Trump continues to be pressed about, obviously, COVID-19, his response, his reaction. And again, the only defense that the administration seems to have, especially when it comes from Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, it's, I shut down the flights from China. I sound like a broken record, but theirs sound like a broken record. That's it. They knew it was more severe. He's on tape. He knew how bad it was. Shutting down flights from China was not enough. That's not man your battle stations. That's not everybody get prepared. And the president, which I think is pretty insulting to everybody's intelligence, is basically said today, or he did say this evening, that there's no middle ground. You either keep people in the dark so they don't panic, or you run around like a chicken with its head cut off, screaming, fire, fire, abandon ship, abandon ship. There's no middle ground, which is ridiculous, and that's just an insult to your intelligence. That's like saying, don't tell the people that we hit an iceberg. Don't tell them. We don't want any panic. Or you could say, we've hit an iceberg. Here's what we're going to do. Ladies and gentlemen, remain calm. Everybody get your life jacket. Get familiar with where you have to be to get on a lifeboat if that's what needs to take place. Have a plan. Have a strategy. People will listen to the leader. That's why we have elected officials. Be a leader. Stand up to the plate. Have a plan. It's one way or the other. Keep people in the dark or run around like a madman with his hair on fire. That's not how it works. And I think the American people see through that. At least I hope they do. Because we deserve to be told the truth. We deserve to know what's going on, and we can handle it. Which is why I think Joe Biden's claim that the American people don't panic, the president panic, is a very effective line. It's a very effective line as far as I'm concerned, because to me, that's what happened. He didn't know how to handle it, so just keep people in the dark. Doesn't want to disturb the stock market because that's his barometer for success. Can't have that go down. And we know that's the case. It's pump, pump, pump. He did it today. Market selling off. Oh no, we're gonna do another spending bill. Don't worry about it. And then, watching some of the analysis after the town hall this evening, somebody mentioned that a member of the Trump campaign, I guess, tweeted out something in regards to the Biden town hall this evening, and saying that Joe Biden looked like Mr. Rogers. Now, to me, I don't know if this individual of the Trump campaign was trying to insult Joe Biden, but everybody loves Mr. Rogers. He's a role model. You put your children in front of the TV set to watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood because he was a role model. Be nice, be kind, learn something, be a good neighbor. So I don't know what type of Kool-Aid these people are drinking in the Trump campaign to somehow think that saying that the town hall on the Biden side this evening looked like Mr. Rogers. That's a compliment as far as I'm concerned, and really shows the difference between Trump, who was combative and loud, versus Joe Biden, who was a little bit more contemplative this evening and more conversational. Now, I don't like Joe Biden's policies. I'm not voting for Joe Biden. But that just shows you the difference, and that's what people are sick and tired of. They are sick and tired of the loudness. They are sick and tired of the divisiveness. They are sick and tired of what is this guy going to say next? What is the president going to tweet next? And that's completely reasonable. That's why this is a referendum on Trump. That's why there's not too many people who are undecided. That's why, despite the fact that Biden is giving a wishy-washy answer, no answer, to the Supreme Court, is basically a non-issue. People have already made up their minds. You either want 4 more years of this or you don't. You either want somebody who's going to at least try to act civilly, try to reach across the aisle, try to get things done for this country, or you have Trump, and you're going to get a continuation of this, and the vitriol and the animus from both sides. There you have it. Federal Reserve's balance sheet for the last week, up from the prior week, some $80 billion, now standing at $7,151 billion, getting close to an all-time high. The all-time high was back in June, where it stood at $7,168 billion. Again, we're at $7,151, so only $17 billion away. That's chump change. Jay Powell can lose that out of his pocket when he's walking down the street in Washington, D.C. But it has been plateauing since then, really. A little bit of a decrease, and then, a very slight increase over the past several weeks. And this is why you have basically the entire team at the Federal Reserve coming out on an almost daily basis in some form or another, giving a speech, giving an interview, writing something, begging Congress to do more because they want their balance sheet to go through the roof. And it is. And if they pass another couple $1 trillion worth of spending, that's exactly what we're going to witness on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, which is what we saw earlier this summer when they threw in the Nobody Cares Act. It's just astonishing, but that's what they're going to do. M2 money stock is at $18,699 billion. That's an increase over the prior week, but not an all-time high. We were slightly below the all-time high of $18,720 billion. So again, just a stone's throw away from an all-time high. This, I wouldn't say is plateauing. It's still increasing, but perhaps at a slower rate. But with more spending likely to be passed in the not-too-distant future, this too will increase higher. This is devastating, but who cares? It's all free, right? It's unbelievable. To the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is urging more spending across the board. Doesn't matter what country, spend more, but especially the United States, spend, spend, spend. You have too much debt? Go deeper into debt. That's the world we live in. That's what these are supposed to be our leaders. These are supposed to be some of the best thinkers out there ahead of these organizations. We got a massive debt problem. Let's take on more debt to get out of debt. Very good. And it has been proposed by some for the IMF to sell some of their gold reserves in order to give that money to poorer nations so that they can forgive their debts. They can pay off their debts, have debt forgiveness, sell the gold. Well, the IMF said, no, we're not going to do that. Gee, I wonder why. When you ask these people why you hold gold, most of them say, well, it's just tradition. That's what Ben Bernanke, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, said. Why do you hold gold? Well, it's just tradition. It's what we do. They know why they hold gold. Because it's real money. That is money. Everything else that's in your pocket, Banana Republic, printing press dollars. That's all it is. They don't want to give it up, and they know where the price is going. Much, much higher. So they're not going to give it up to benefit some poor country. No way in hell. Not going to happen. Then if you look at the U.S. debt clock, because I just want you to understand this full picture, when you are told that taxes aren't going to go up, they are. U.S. federal tax revenue, slightly over $3 trillion and going down. Okay? Then you have some of the largest items. Medicare, Medicaid at $1.3 trillion. Social Security at about $1.1 trillion. Defense spending at a little over $700 billion. And the net interest on our debt alone at $340 billion. So, you just add up those four items, you're going to have a deficit of $400 billion right off the bat. $400 billion. I would have to go back and look to see how long it took this country to have a $400 billion deficit. This is going to be the norm. This is before we even get started. This doesn't take into consideration other transfer payments for welfare, for food stamps. This doesn't take into consideration your other spending for the Justice Department, for the Agricultural Department, for the EPA, for infrastructure. So at a minimum, you are talking a $500 billion at a minimum before we even get started. This is such a drag on future growth, it's not even funny. So the president can tout all he wants how great the Q3 number is going to be. I want to know what it's going to be in the fourth quarter, the first quarter of next year, the second, third, and fourth, and so on. Because despite how bad the economic carnage has been this year, we ain't seen nothing yet. When you print $7 trillion this year alone and take in a combined several trillion on top of that globally, you're going to buy yourself some time. You're going to make yourself look good for a little bit. I mean, there's just no way around it. You throw that much money at the problem, you're going to get a little bit of some camouflage. You're going to get a little bit of a cover to do something. But all that has done has set the stage for the Greatest Depression. In fact, it is all but guaranteed it, if history is any indication, and of course history is a great guide. Now, this is going to be inflationary. It is by definition. It will turn into stagflation, and it will turn into hyperinflation. Now, will hyperinflation happen in the U.S.? That's a legitimate question. I think it could, but it's definitely happening elsewhere, and that is not a solution. That's a problem. If hyperinflation was great, then Venezuela wouldn't have a problem. Argentina wouldn't have a problem. Lebanon wouldn't have a problem. Turkey, Iran, Zimbabwe, they wouldn't have problems. But they do, because inflation is not a solution. It is a huge problem. That's why I tell you, the inflation tax is the most destructive and devastating form of taxation that there is. But these politicians, these central bankers, will never say that to you, ever. Ever. Initial jobless claims. And don't forget, we still have California on a couple-week pause here, so these numbers are still distorted, like everything else. Seasonally adjusted data in the week ending October 10th. The advanced figure for seasonally adjusted initial claims was 898,000, an increase of 53,000 from the previous week's revised level. The previous week's level was revised upward by 5,000 from 840,000 to 845,000. The 4-week moving average was 866,250, an increase of 8,000 from the previous week's revised average. The previous week's average was revised up by 1,250 from 857,000 to 858,250. So clearly the wrong direction, and what we have been witnessing over the past few weeks has been a decrease in that average. But again, we were at such a high number. We had claims north of 1 million, then we dropped to the 800,000, which is still devastating and heartbreaking. But when you're taking in the calculation for an average, that is going to put downward pressure. But since we have been sort of leveling out here in this 800,000 range, to see this type of increase, we are now seeing an increase in the average, the 4-week moving average, which is not a good indication. But that is in agreement with what we have been stating here for weeks. that things are not getting better. And as I just stated, those trillions of dollars thrown into the system are only going to buy you so much time. And we are at the end of all of that funny money. So again, for the week ending October 10th, initial claims are at 898,000, an increase of 53,000 from the prior week, which again was revised upward by 5,000. Continuing claims for the week ending October 3rd, it lags a week, 10,018,000, a decrease from the prior week of let's round up a little bit, 1.2 million. So that's a good thing. That's in the right direction. But then we have to look, of course, at everything. Persons claiming UI benefits, unemployment insurance benefits in all programs, regular state, federal employees, newly discharged veterans, pandemic unemployment assistance, pandemic emergency UC. Those two policies and programs are sort of the children of the Nobody Cares Act. The extended benefits, state additional benefits, and a work share program. You have the grand total of 25,300,000. That is a decrease from the prior week of 215,000. And again, this will be for the week ending September 26th. This grand total number lags a couple weeks, as we know. Biggest decline seen in regular state unemployment, declining by nearly 800,000. A decrease of some 220,000 for the pandemic unemployment assistance. But a big gain, a big spike of over 800,000, nearly 820,000 in the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation program, which is really for your gig workers and for small businesses. So that is something to be very mindful of in conjunction with so many other things. Again, the insolvencies and bankruptcies that are waiting in the wings, the evictions. This has enormous downward pressure on the economy, has enormous upward pressure on job losses, and we are starting to see, and have been, corporation after corporation, survey after survey, mentioning that massive layoffs are going to continue. So this is not going to get better anytime soon. Sure, they can pass another trillion, 1.5, 2 trillion, it's just kicking the can down the road. We all have to pay for this. If you're putting your money in your pocket now, it's because your future self is paying you. There is no free lunch. Understand this, and it is stealing and robbing future prosperity. But again, nobody wants to have these conversations. So, a continued distortionary picture, unfortunately, because of the Nobody Cares Act, because of the various emergency facilities instituted and implemented by the Federal Reserve, because of this 2-week pause from the state of California, and perhaps further distortionary effects if more spending is passed and implemented over the coming weeks. So we'll be sure to keep you updated, but those are some of the bigger talking points for today. Townhalls and jobs, there you have it. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.